Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Knocked Conscious. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Johnny Martinez. He's the host of the Warriorhealerpodcast. It was a great conversation. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it. Johnny Martinez, welcome. Let me make sure I'm recording because I never know if this thing's actually working because I am the worst at this.
I
Let me
understand.
see.
Where
Where is that
I've
at?
done one. It says recording on my screen, so I think we're good.
It says it on mine too, so I'm going to trust it. It usually has a time on it, though. There it
Mine's got
goes. All right.
okay, I was gonna say mine has
Woohoo!
one. Yeah, I
Okay, yeah, I just got
understand
the
the StreamYard process. I've done one episode on here so far, and we just like 2 hours ago we're working through it, and I thought I lost all the files and it was gone, and
Oh, no.
yeah, it was a bit of a
Is it
mess.
was it the first time you used it or
It was, yeah, first time on my
awesome, man.
platform.
Right. Well, welcome, man. Welcome. You are the head of the Warrior Healer podcast. Is that right?
Warrior Healer podcast, yes.
Nice. So I just jumped on your Instagram real quick. I'd like to read the 3 reasons to subscribe to the Warrior Healer podcast through your Instagram, if I may. It
Yeah,
sounded really
absolutely.
interesting to me. So welcome to Knocked Conscious, first of all. I'm very excited to talk because I think it's just going to be this real flowing conversation about whatever comes up, to be honest.
Mhm.
So,
I look
number
forward
one.
to it.
Awesome, man. So, real stories of resilience. Every episode dives deep into the personal journeys of guests who have overcome adversity, from trauma and addiction to self discovery and healing. Number two, practical tools for personal growth. From meditation practice and medicine insights, learn actionable techniques to unlock your spiritual and emotional growth. And last but not least, and I'm sure there's more than three, but three would be community and connection. Join a community of listeners who are committed to living with intention, healing, and supporting one another's growth. Those are beautiful messages, man. So welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to
Thank
have
you
you
for
on.
having me.
A good friend of yours and an acquaintance of mine, whom I met once or a few times through Freedom Fest this summer, connected us. So I'm very grateful to him as well. So Warrior Healer, I heard it. Our friend talked about it, and I was instantly interested in what you bring to the table. So I just want to love to hear a origin story because like I love to hear how people got where they got because it's very important because I think if we can trace back each step, we see where we diverged from other places where we might have made different choices or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Warrior Healer, how did it start? I mean, tell me about where it started for you. It's got to be probably childhood on. So
So, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately and fortunately, I suppose, right? From birth, really. Um, Trying to think of how deep I want to go here right off the bat.
yeah,
Ultimately,
absolutely,
the
man. We'll start easy, and like I said, as it comes up, it's not.
yeah. So I guess to answer your question, the creation of the Warrior Healer podcast, um, I had thought about it for like roughly a year or so, and it was very intriguing to me. I felt as if it was something that I wanted to do, but I just didn't have, ultimately the self-worth to kind of jump into it, and fear of being heard and all of these other things that kind of surfaced with that. And excuse me. I ended up attending a ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica, and that was my third ceremony sitting with the grandmother medicine. And out there, I connected with, I'll say a pretty high level podcaster, I guess, if there are levels to this or whatever.
There
A
are.
lot of listeners and stuff, been doing it for quite a while. And uh, we were friendly going into it, not particularly friends, but we knew each other. We had numbers and stuff like that. And throughout the process out there, I'll give him a shout out, Greg Anderson with the Endless Endeavor podcast. We sat for 10 days together in a little hut. We sat through ceremonies together. We ended up leaving the ceremony retreat early for reasons that I go into in a couple of my episodes. But out there, alongside Greg and a couple of other individuals, it was just a really good community of guys that had an understanding and a perspective of where I was coming from, and they had done the things that I guess had my sights kind of set on, right? Not particularly, but a little bit. And it got me fucking amped, dude. excuse my language. I don't know if we could swear here, but
No,
it got
no, that
okay.
this is a swearing pot. This is all about like energy and because it's about
Okay,
passion, right?
beautiful.
So
Yes,
if you
and
got
so
fucking amped, you got fucking amped. Like if you
yeah,
got
man.
like that energy, that blood flowing, and you just like that, you just feel it, right? It started like pulsing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so we didn't even come back from Costa Rica yet, or I didn't even return home yet, and I had bought the website domain name. I had went on GoDaddy and did all this stuff, and I created the Instagram and everything while I was out there. And the day that I landed from Costa Rica, I bought all of the setup that I have. And the primary push behind why I wanted to create this was because going into Costa Rica, like I said, I had been on my healing journey for a little while at that point already. And I showed up out there in one of the worst places I had been in a very long time when it came to mental health aspects. Um, I would never actually do it, but I had suicidal ideations and thoughts very often, a lot of depression, loss of purpose, many, many things surfacing. And I'm sure we'll get into why some of those came up or whatever. But going out there,
Parallel that, yeah.
yeah, going out there and sitting and just talking with these guys that could understand me and connect. And, I'd been in this community before, so I knew what to expect, but it was something that I wasn't, I wasn't necessarily expecting that kind of energy out there. The want to come home and like fucking crush the world kind of feeling, right? And like, we do got something to say, right? And so, yeah, I came home and I wanted to
So
try and create
was
a
it all men
platform.
at this specific retreat?
It
Was it
was
all
not.
men or
It was
okay?
not.
So
So, I
but
shared
you
my
found
bunk.
yourself connecting a little bit to the more to the men in the group? Is
Correct.
that
I always feel very connected to everyone. Honestly, I do.
yeah?
But
But you're
in that
you're a military
particular
guy, right? I mean, it makes sense that you
correct.
would have some masculine tendencies that would kind of connect you in hobbies or some kind of interest or something.
Correct. Correct. And a common perspective, right? They have served, they have seen some stuff, they have this
So you've been through some
understanding.
of the same things.
Yeah, yeah, to some variable, right? And I wanted to come home and have guests come on and share where they were in life and how they got there because I had felt as if I climbed out of the deepest steps that you could possibly imagine. And it had been decades of feeling that way in and out. And then it really just come into this big, peak in a, or I guess valley, really. And
Yeah. And well,
man,
it comes to a head. Like the think about like as you approach the speed of sound, right? Certain parts of the aircraft hit that drag that you have to push through. And it's that pressure of that point. That's where you have to either throttle through it or pull back and just get out, right?
hmm hmm And so I had this perspective now of, man, that was pretty crazy, right? All of those feelings. I can't believe I was in that place. And I'm so grateful and excited and happy that I got out of that. Now I want to try and share because I know a lot, if not everyone, has felt some level of that. And I do believe, and I do see very often, hence the reason I work with people, it can surface in many, many ways. It doesn't have to go to that extreme, right? But everyone has faced their demons or is exposed to their shadow sides. And some people don't have answers or ways to get out. Most individuals feel very alone in that space, as did I. And because of that, it creates seclusion when there should be a commonality there. It's a talking point. Every single person has baggage. And when you start to address the baggage, you realize it's kind of all the same. And it's not discrediting anyone because trauma, I believe, is subjective, right? You stubbing your toe could have been the peak of yours when, I was domestically abused or whatever the case, right? Whatever the comparison,
Right.
but they can both
There's a
be
contrast there.
100.
Right. Everybody's worst place is their worst place from what they experience individually. There is
Yep.
no way to they're everyone's apples and oranges, every single experience. And even if you expound that genetically, how we react to that depends on some of our genetic disposition, how we're wired. So there's so many factors that go into how it really is cultivated into like a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to answer the rest of the question, that's kind of why the podcast exists. And so it's to, Get some of those people that have been through hell and back. Maybe they're still there and they need a little bit of guidance and someone to hold space and listen to their story, because sharing time and sharing your story are some of the most powerful gifts that you can give anybody. So thank you for your time. Thank you for having me on, right? And same to all of my guests. Thank you so much for coming on and giving me, that time, the audience that time and a different perspective on a lot of the same things.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank you first of all because w- I've been doing this for like 4 years. I got almost 200 podcasts. I
Mhm.
I I just want to talk to people and just get to know. I love meeting people. I just love meeting people, getting to know who they are, how they tick. And when our mutual friend connected us, I'm like, please let Johnny come on first. This isn't a whole quid pro quo like, I'll follow you, follow me. This isn't about that. It's about let's get the stories out. You know what I mean? I'd love to hear
Mhm.
your story to share to people who haven't heard something like that. So thank you for sharing your time. It's really you're the person offering your time. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I look forward to it, man. Yeah, this is always fun to just openly talk, right? With nothing
Yeah.
there are no expectations, and I welcome that.
Yeah. So I would assume do you have you do a lot of stories with people who come from different backgrounds and whatnot. Would you say a majority of your people do come from some military or some kind of physical trauma background that you come across? Or is there like a demographic of male female breakdown, what type of traumas they've gone through, who's been through your show, or how they're resolving those issues or things like that?
Yeah, so I guess short answer, there's not really like a standard that I base anything off of, right? Because again, it's all subjective. And if you're willing to share it, then I welcome the space and I will hold a place of non-judgment, because I surely cannot judge anybody. I've been a piece of shit a long majority of my life. I openly can say that and I know that. But I am not anymore. And I've done a lot of hard work and I've traveled the country and the world seeking the best teachers that you can, right? Sorry, I love tangents very much. Uh,
No, I was actually gonna call my show Tangents. Literally, my buddy and
I
I, we
think you
go to
should
like
have,
A to
yeah.
J to B to Q, just jump around, man. That's what it's all about. So just follow the flow of
Perfect,
consciousness. That's
perfect.
really what it is. Because you know what's funny? Like we talk about that just as an aside. We'll probably get into the whole energy thing, law of attraction, all that stuff. But it's like we talk about attracting others, and that's not how it works. We need to align with the energy. So when we have a conversation like this and it gets off, there's a reason it broke off.
Hmm.
So we have to just follow that current of it because that's where the epiphanies happen, I think. So feel free to just share however you'd like to.
Beautiful. I wasn't sure how you ran the show. That's typically how I run it as well.
I
I
don't,
think a
man.
lot of the
It runs
answers
itself
come I think a lot of like the good material comes from those tangents, because that's the free
for
flow of
sure.
energy that we're talking about.
Right. It's like that
Um,
flow. It's like when a bandmates start jamming together, you can start getting that back and forth and you start resonating and then you start just feeling it. And then
mhm.
stuff comes out that you just never, you're like, whoa, that did someone just say that? And it's their literal epiphany moments.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the demographic, I would say, is primarily men, roughly, 20 to 40, 50 years old. And a large majority of the individuals I've had on as of this point, which, is like 75-ish episodes, is primarily out of like military, jujitsu, law enforcement, because that is the community that I just naturally resonated with before I became this very open, vulnerable individual. And so the transition is slowly working more into the healing modalities. It's bringing in, acupuncturists and ketamine doctors, and because again, that's kind of part of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to welcome these different modalities, these things that I have came in contact with, and trying to find the best instructors, people in the area, building that community. But
It's
I'm
kind of
very
like
open to
funny,
having
right? It's like saying,
anyone on.
and that's kind of funny, right? Because they're like, hey, okay, you want to get bigger biceps. Okay, just do curls. Well, that's not the only exercise you need. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
There's many exercises you can do to get bigger biceps, right? That's where you come in. You're looking at different modalities of healing. It's like healing just doesn't happen straight up. It's almost like a little bit, 10%, of your medicine that you're talking about that we'll get into, maybe a 5% spiritual component, 10, 15% of this, 90% diet, whatever those percentages are, that all makes the whole, right? To make
Mhm.
that person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I hit on jujitsu a little bit, and that played a really big part. And so, because of that, that was a large portion of the community starting right off the bat. And because of that, it gave me a new gratitude for the gym that I go to and attend, and the space that um, those gyms are capable of holding. And it makes training this whole new thing because it's introduced a level of vulnerability to the gym. All of these individuals that are friends and syncing up, and they're like, hanging out with each other and going out and doing stuff, but they don't really know each other. But they know their energy, which says more than whatever your story is. But now, um, thanks to me, I suppose, but I'm not going to take credit for that, right? Because of
Well,
a
it's like a hub and
platform.
spoke thing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get what you're
because of
saying
a
though, but it's a hub and
platform
spoke
that I
thing
put
for sure.
there,
Yeah.
they were able to come and share their stories, and it's opening up to deeper friendships, deeper level of communication, and then opening up that expansion of knowledge and conversation ultimately on an authentic, genuine level, as opposed to the who you voting for, all this shit, right? Like, bro, I don't care about any of that. You know what I mean? Like, how are
I
you
hear
doing?
you.
How do you feel?
Yeah, how you feeling, right? That's
Mhm.
funny. It's interesting. You mentioned jujitsu. I've got a weird story. Do you know who Pat Miletich is by any chance?
I
UFC
feel like
guy,
I've heard the name, but
a
I'm
little
not
older guy.
positive.
And
Okay.
anyway, well, it was really interesting. But right after Freedom Fest, somehow he got invited to my house the Tuesday after. So he came over. I bought like $400 worth of steak, like antibiotic steak, and all this like super healthy stuff. He was like a UFC champ. He's like actually like I think he was welter or middle. I think he was welterweight champ.
Okay.
And anyway, so he invited me to, like, he was doing some Brazilian jiu-jitsu training that night. And I'm like, I'm 50, man. I haven't rolled in forever. Like, I've got a messed up rib. Like, I tore my cartilage just rolling there for a second. But watching that community though, like watching these people like vibe, you know what I mean? It was pretty
Mhm.
cool. And I'm trying to get them on the podcast. I met a father-daughter, 14-year-old daughters brought her dad into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Now they're both doing it together. And it's like, that's like better than the Taylor Swift football thing. Cause like that could be fleeting. You know what I mean? Like this is like discipline and structure and like like it is real community. And watching
Mhm.
those people like together is really cool. It's really great to see.
Yeah, yeah, it's a beautiful space. I am a big advocate for it. I should be training a little bit more than I do myself, but life gets busy. And jujitsu is always there, but it always has a place in my heart because of that. It is this
Yeah.
temple of healing in essence, really.
So do you find it interesting? I would think back in the day, when men started sharing their feelings, they would generally share it to women because there's no weakness in sharing a man's weakness to a woman because, like, men are still stronger than women, right? Like, there's a stigma there, right? You're now seeing men completely opening up in all these different spaces in a very vulnerable way, like literally showing their soft white underbelly. Where do you see that shift starting where that had finally started becoming kind of an acceptable thing for us?
I'm gonna be honest, I still don't think it's entirely acceptable or accepted rather. I think
No,
it's
not 100. It's not even
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, it's not it's very, very far from, but it is. I will say the tides are absolutely turning. It's happening at a pretty rapid rate, thanks to a lot of, I guess, media directed at it and people talking about all of this healing and different modalities and plant medicines and retreats and all these things that are out there to go and do. And the VA started looking into like psilocybin usage and ketamine usage and all of these other things that are opening up to a lot of pathways. But I was married before I got a divorce, and I was very closed off emotionally. I would have like never cried. I was not empathetic. I just didn't understand anything ultimately when it came to like feelings and emotion. Totally shut them off pretty much a large majority of my life. And going to my first ayahuasca ceremony, I returned back with a very deep level of vulnerability. That was where I was exposed to it. I felt trusted and, respected enough to be able to do that, and that there was no judgment and a lot of respect held there for those things. And so I came home and was very vulnerable and came with a whole new side and perspective on things. And I know it was very challenging for her because it's an entirely different human being. And then what I ended up doing, not to share too much, I guess, but I got frustrated because it's like, fuck being vulnerable. Like, look, and then I got a divorce a week later, by the way. And so it's like, why am I going to be vulnerable? This is what I get. Like, they talk about how great this is and all this shit. And she can't even understand what I'm talking about at all because I'm a different human. And then I'm getting mad about it. But I didn't learn the
Yeah,
lesson
there's
of
like a weird
I can't be
resentment
mad about
towards
that.
that.
Yeah,
When
because
I
I'm
went through
doing
my
the
biggest
right
changes,
thing.
I was in the middle of a relationship and it was the same thing. And it grew us apart because we literally just grew in different ways.
Mhm. Yeah,
And you come
absolutely.
back in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, that vulnerability has really stuck with me, and that's I'll say my bread and butter to some extent. Ultimately, that's what I welcome in every space because I don't have shit to hide from anyone. It's just what it is. The past is the past, and so it is.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of
You can acknowledge the
individuals get
past without
stuck.
having to like be bound to the victimhood of it, right? Like, look, yes, mistakes were made, or this does equal that. That did. You can be accountable per se, but you don't have to blame it. You don't have to put blame on something just because something occurred that created another thing. It's not like fault. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Shit happens, and many times you do it unintentionally. You're trying to do something else, and you do it the other way because you get it. You can't get out of your own head. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a challenge. It's challenging to be vulnerable to some extent, and if I'm being entirely vulnerable, which I claim to be, I still struggle with it at some level. That level being at the deepest levels when it comes to relationships with families, my son, relationships with a significant other, because then you're at your peak vulnerability, the absolute highest, and then you get frustrated or these things get twanged, right? Your strings are getting struck. That's when you need to be the most vulnerable and open, but it's so scary to do. And that's why no one does it, or a lot of people don't. And then you get right, the part that transitions into that is a fear of not being heard, a fear of not being seen, a fear of losing respect because I'm showing myself to you. I'm absolutely vulnerable and naked. I'm a child, kind of, because when you're addressing these things, you're going back to your traumas. Well, the traumas
Right.
almost always result from childhood. So you are becoming a little kid. That's why you start flying off the handles, right? I have big emotions and I'm passionate, and you're screaming. It's like, oh, you're having a temper tantrum.
You're
That's
having a
okay.
tantrum, like, literally,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
okay, but grow aware to it, learn from it, what's happening, and then address it and work from that. Again, I love tangents, but I'm a big advocate for vulnerability, but it does ruffle some feathers, but it will hold you true to yourself, which is the most important piece.
With some vulnerability comes some truth, or all truth, I guess. And I think what happens is when it hurts others because of that fear to be vulnerable, when someone's able to do it first, for them then to take that step, it's great because it does allow someone easier to take that step. But when they compare themselves to you, they almost see like, what the heck? I can't open myself up that much, you know? So sometimes it almost has that reverse effect, you know what I mean? But you just offer, I do the same thing where I just offer what it is. And it's not like, oh, I am XYZ victim 1, 2, 3. I'm go, this is what I experienced. I think this is how I react to things. And I work on that daily, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again why I work with individuals, and I felt called to do that on a one-to-one basis as a spiritual advisor is because I've been to some pretty dark places. I've done a lot of things, I've seen a lot of shit, I've experienced a good amount of stuff. But I've either healed it or I am in the process of healing it, and I am always growing aware to the next trauma. And because of that, it allows me the perspective of, I know exactly what you're feeling and going through because I've done it. There is hope. And a lot of the shit, I'm still fighting myself, and I'm very open about that. But I do have the perspectives and the guidance that will get you to a place that's better. 100%. Right?
That's
You're
awesome. It's a
navigating the
beautiful thing.
darkness, you're finding the light, and then I go back and shine flashlights on it for others, and if they feel called to do so.
That's really amazing. So how when did you start the journey on the podcast itself?
A year and a half ago, roughly, is when I
Nice.
opened
And
up
now
the
you
podcast.
started to build this community of people and things like that. How do you mainly communicate to your community? Do you do it through like a social media, or do you do it through podcast, or do you do it through a blog, or
I guess there are variables or different variables that play, right? Primarily, it is the podcasting. There are a handful or a good amount of Instagram posts and stuff like that to stay engaged and active. And then there's always this push to try and do the next best thing, right? The next bigger thing. What can affect more? What can we try and make change to instead of sitting on the couch and complaining and bitching about everything is going wrong in this country and I wish they would do more for these people and this, and it's like just be the change then, right? And so
right?
I am going to try and do the same and eat my own medicine with that. And so in a couple of weeks, actually, on the Marine Corps birthday, November 10th, uh, myself is hosting alongside a sound healer, Adagio Sound Healing, a free veteran sound bath. And, we had to donate $1,000 for that. We're very close right now. And so I guess that's the next big thing, right? That's the next big conversation and the next big
Yeah.
space opening. And I have a very
Please share that
simple.
link, because I'll put it in there. Maybe we can get some people to donate.
Absolutely, I would greatly appreciate that. I'll get that to you after. But the
Absolutely.
concept's very basic. It's very easy. And it came to me when I was sitting in ceremony in Costa Rica next to one of my friends who lives in Washington. And we seen, I won't bore you with the story, but ultimately these two like little these like two little fire specks all is what we were staring at.
I'm not bored. Is this during your ceremony?
It is, yeah. So we were laying on
You had
our
a shared
back.
vision? You had a shared
It
vision
wasn't a
then, or
shared vision, it was actually happening, but we were
oh,
just
okay.
like so like what is like we couldn't tell what was happening, but we were seeing the same thing. But it wasn't like
Right.
crazy psychedelic.
Got it. Got it.
Um we were laying on our backs in a top of the hut that we were doing our medicine ceremony in. There's a big dome. And so you have exposure to the outside. And so we were sitting there and you could see some stars, but there were these two, they look like fires. And we couldn't figure out where they were coming from or if they were reflections from somewhere. But we started talking. And then there was a third one in Costa Rica where we were. Like if you were to view it geographically on a map, and we both just came to the same conclusion of like every ceremony, every good conversation, every piece of medicine that you can offer to someone is igniting another fire. And that fire is another space of healing. They will start to go and pass these things on because, of course, it's going to affect your life. It will change your life.
Yeah.
And if you allow it to do so, you're going to become an advocate for it because why wouldn't you? Right?
Right.
You become of service.
Interesting. So I don't want to delve too personally, of course, but we
I'll
start with
go
childhood
wherever you
trauma.
want, brother.
Okay. In a general sense, were there specific incidents that you had? Like, for example, I had a car accident at 13. I had a near death experience, and I'm happy to share that on your thing if we ever talk about it. But I there's a lot of stuff I want to share with you. It's just I want you to share your time. So I had that, for example, and I know I had some head trauma. I would assume we all have different things. Military has a lot of TBI type stuff. Was your trauma a general pressure trauma, you think, from childhood, or were there specific events you may have had that impacted it?
Both. I have I have some darkness in my life up until I'm like 12 years old, roughly. There still kind of remains a good amount of darkness within there. All of the memories that I can, I guess, grasp within that time frame are in the realm of like pretty negative and kind of bad and scary to like domestic abuse between my aunt and uncle, and we had to call the police, and she had a broken orbital bone and shit, stuff like that. Like, so there's a lot of different variables. um
So
I never met.
there's a constant energy in the house in a way that throughout your childhood that you,
Yeah, yeah, you're cutting out here for me just a little bit. Hang on, let me see.
did I lose you? There we go.
Oh, we're coming back.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
All right, we're good. Okay. So if I may, would you say
Mhm.
it was like there was a lot of atmospheric general energy, like your whole family had that negativity to it, so you're kind of bathing in it too? So you're getting that to start?
Yeah, so I never met my father. We moved to Wisconsin from California when I was 1 year old with my mother and my sister. We moved in with my grandparents who owned a bar and a restaurant. And so I grew up above a bar. And, so there comes all of those I guess possible triggering situations or trauma inducing situations that come with that.
Well,
So
think about
yeah,
the people and
very.
how they're feeling when they go to the bar. Like
Mhm.
like we talk, like we're finding we talk, we're gonna talk ayahuasca and these things, these other plant medicines, but there's that energy there. Well, imagine the depths of what a bar feel like. And it's not that a bar's negative in any way. It's a beautiful place for community. But in a lot of ways, you got those few guys in the corner just sitting there, just throwing them back, just like hating their life. So I can only imagine some of those types of characters being there as well.
Yeah, yeah, man. The story goes pretty deep, I suppose, to like before it was a bar, it was, I think, like a brothel or a whorehouse back in the day, stuff like that. So energy stays in those places if it's not properly cleared. And I can tell you, it has never been properly cleared. And so you grow up with all of this stuff, watching parents fight. Mom has been divorced 3 times. I caught one of them cheating. And, like it just goes on and on and on. And I'm not saying that I have more trauma than anyone, just to clarify. I'm just saying
No, no,
there's a
no.
lot
You
of it,
have
and
what you
because of
have.
it, it gives me a
Right.
very broad spectrum everywhere. I can relate to most people. If you wanna go down sexual assaults, I have a handful of those with different individuals from my family, how that has affected me. My sister and my mother are both very narcissistic individuals, and how that affects people, right? These are ongoing discoveries, right? The boundary just got set with my family this week that I can no longer see you guys for a little while until I can hold my own energy around you. It's too much there for
Wow.
me, right? So the
Yeah.
healing's still happening. I'm still coming to these discoveries, but I don't have an
Always
issue
gonna have.
sharing them because it's going to help everyone. Everyone
Yeah.
struggles at home, man. It's all
Yeah.
the same.
My
It's all
birthday
the
was
same
about a month
stuff.
and a half ago. Birthday was about a month and a half ago. Both my parents still alive. Thank goodness. They're amazing people. Amazing. Love them to death. But there's stuff.
Mhm.
And I have been depressed for a month and a half. It's just been like since I've been gone. And it was like not a bad visit in lieu of other visits I've had, but man, it comes back so quickly and so easily. It's
It
really weird.
does. It does. And to jump all over like we like to do here. With the divorce, I get my son every other weekend. I have a son, he's 4.5. And
Nice.
I would always try and make this time and effort to go and see family. And I would always leave feeling shitty and just never really figure out like why until very recently. And it's the energy. I'm still holding on to the traumas, to the issues, to the baggage, some of
You're
which isn't
orbiting them.
even mine. It's not, yeah,
Right.
some of the
Oh,
stuff I
totally.
hold on
It's
to, a
not all.
large
It's all passed
majority
on.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, some of it is just it's given to you, and
Yeah.
it can become a superpower if you allow it to be, but you have to view it from that
Yeah, it can certainly
perspective.
take over. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
you can mold it to fuel you or to burn you, right? Like there's
Yep.
those are the two ways you can use it. So
Yeah.
when did you have your first ceremony, you said? When would you like what year or what age were you when that happened?
Yeah, so that would have been, like, 3.5 years ago. I think it was roughly May, I think, of 2021.
Oh, so this is very recent.
Yeah, yeah, I've been on the journey for, yeah, about 3.5 years, but I would say at a pretty I'm kind of going after it because I had enough, man. I was not at a good place. And then
Sometimes you have
what
to just take that
happened,
extreme and really.
yeah, and then what happened was this shift where I discovered that I hold all the medicine within myself to heal all of these things already. And then that's where facilitation and other things started coming into play. I'm finding teachers to go and hold space with and holding ceremonies around, different locations and holding space for other individuals, right? That becomes the place of service because of the healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a hell of a journey so far. I'm very excited to continue doing so, and I think I can honestly say I'm at the biggest turning point right now in the whole journey. I've come to one of the biggest peaks that I have come to find, and I'm excited to face it, but it's a big one.
Yeah, beautiful. And you, as you know, because I've been where you are, and I've probably reverted back to behind where you are now. Like I've run the gamut of every bit of that.
Mhm.
Um, but what's interesting is you'll come look at that, and man, I just lost my train of thought. Gosh darn it. See, that's why it's called tangents, man.
That'll happen.
But
That will
basically
happen.
you were saying oh man, what the heck were you just talking about?
Ah,
Anyway.
don't put me on the spot too, dude.
No, see, that's what happens, man. See, I've got my own medicine right here. It's my own problem. So,
There you go.
uh,
There
anyway,
you go. Mine's
so
right over there.
so so you come out of the military at some point before you did your ayahuasca ceremonies. Is that correct? Are you out of the military at that point?
Correct, and so there's a whole story with that I've gotta learn and, grow from too. I got a DUI towards
Sure.
the end of my enlistment. I went from, uh, picking up sergeant in 4 years and doing reenlistment, and I got my dream package and everything assigned to me and all these letters of recommendation, and then I got my DUI. That was I could figure it out. It would take me a minute, maybe 8, 9 months prior to when I could have left, right? The intention was to stay, but now I went
Right.
from all of these letters of recommendation to do not recommend. I went from tier 1, automatic reenlistment if you choose, to tier 4. You might be selected, but probably not. All of
Wow.
these things to where I was in a
And
way
this is
or
one
essence.
one decision, or not even one decision, because it's many, because you got caught once. Let's be honest. Like
Oh,
I
thousands, thousands.
I never had a DUI, but I am not one to say that I never drank and drove at some point in my life. Like that is a
Yeah.
lie if I were to say that. So I can only tell you that I never got pulled over for a DUI. That is the only
Mhm.
truth I can tell you. So in
Wow.
this one time you get, was it like an innocuous issue DUI, or did something bad happen, or
A whole
was like it was a
more
stupid shit one, wasn't it?
stupid.
It was a
Oh,
stupid one, wasn't it?
stupid but wild, yeah.
Right. Well, I get it. I get
Everything
it.
I have is fucking big stories, man. I don't live life very, very mellow, I suppose. And so,
Oh, that's
yeah, the
great.
DUI, I went out, I partied for a Packer game out there. I think it was like a 10 a.m. game because I was in San
Oh, you
Diego.
do in Wisconsin, right?
That's exactly
Oh,
right.
in
And
San
so I
Diego.
came back, and I'm not dumb enough to drive, right? Dumb enough to drive through the gate while I'm drunk. So you park your car outside and then you walk into base. You can't get in trouble. So I park my car. Me and my buddy are there, and we're smoking a cigarette outside the car, and it's hot as shit. And we decide, let's get back in the car for some AC. And then I'm talking to a girl, he's talking to a girl who are also best friends, and they're 2 miles away at a bar. And so they invite us, and we're like, of course, of course.
It's 2 miles away. What a
Yeah.
big deal. I got the air
I,
conditioner blowing in my face. I'm
that's right.
awake.
It's going to be a
It's
cake.
cold. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it was a brand new car. I had never made a, car payment on it. I had just bought it in Wisconsin, drove it all the way there. Um, I think it was like a 2018 or no, 2016 it would have been. Um, Shit, my brain's taking a dump right now. Charger or
Yeah. Oh,
Challenger.
nice. Yeah. Challenger.
Challenger
Okay.
with like a
Yeah. So
scat pack and
Those
all that
new Dodge
stuff.
retro, those retro hot cars that everybody's got. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So I jumped on that train like everyone else in the military. And I was just fucking tearing down this street. I think it was a 25 or 35, and I know I was going 100. And what it does is the road starts to climb up just a little bit, and then it drops and
And it
turns.
drops.
And I
Yep.
didn't know. And by the time we
Yeah.
kind of got gravity to sink back in, we were sliding into the turn. The last thing that either of us really remember is like hitting the curb and then just getting whipped around the car. And then, however long later, you know, the car's sideways back in the middle of the road. Half of my engine block is missing. My tire's down the
Oh,
street a quarter mile, but neither one of us is injured and I didn't hurt anybody. I crashed into a
right. And you're
power
looking at
box.
each other going, what the fuck?
Yeah. So I crashed. Ultimately, I crashed through a power box, a tree, very small tree, and we hit a building up like a hill. And then we came back down the hill. And on the building, the
Wow.
marks were like 8.5 to 9 feet up the wall. So we had climbed up the building too and came back
Oh my
down.
God.
And as soon as everything was like kind of, you know, literally the dust settling from the airbags, I look at my buddy expecting him fully to be dead, you know, and I'm just shaking and panicking. And I look over and he's awake and looks at me and I ask him, "You good, brother?" And you know, he gives the little body check and he's like, "I think so." You? I was like, "I think so." And then we just stared at each
Yeah.
other for a while and I was like,
Oh, you're probably shaking.
"Oh,
Your adrenaline is
yeah,
just
oh
through
yeah."
the just
And I was
spike.
like, "Oh, I fucked up bad, you know, real bad." And so that's how I got my DUI. And because of that, yeah,
Well,
kind of
that's a good way to do it. Look, if you're gonna do it, it's better than like I thought you were gonna tell a story. You guys were hot. You got in the car, turned it on to turn the AC on. The cop
pulled
pulls
over.
up, flips the
Oh no.
lights.
Totaled the
You know what I
car,
mean?
fucked
Like I've
everything
seen
up.
stupid shit like that happen. Where you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
come
I
on,
went
man,
to jail
cool it
for
off.
it. It was
Right.
a whole thing,
Wow.
yeah. Didn't
Well, I'm
have I
glad
was
no one got
broke.
hurt. I'm glad everyone's safe. I'm really sorry
Yeah.
that happened. You clearly
Don't be
learned from
sorry,
this.
brother.
It's not like
Yeah, it's
someone's gonna
nothing
tell
to be
you that,
sorry about.
duh, you learned it. You learned from it. Wow. Well, it's great that you can walk away, that you can share that story. So that would
Yeah.
that have been your rock bottom? Would you say that was it? That was when you
My absolute rock bottom that I think I've hit was post-divorce. Because I had to look at the man that I created and the mirror that I was faced with for the last, whatever, 28, 29 years at that point, and it wasn't pretty, and through the birth of my son, I felt this whole new purpose in life, a purpose that I felt I lost. I didn't have anything to live for is what I felt, and then I had my son, and it was like, "Ah, this is what I'm here for." And then we got a divorce. And because of, you know, looking back at it now, there's more variables that play into it, including, you know, not wanting to be seen, not want to, like I'm creating my own traumas. I'm creating my own worst situations. I consistently have done that many times in my life. And that was a situation where I did the same, but it was justified. My schedule was tight. I was still an apprentice as an electrician. And so I'd have night school and stuff. And so I set the schedule that every other weekend I'll get him. You know, that's it. That's good. That's all I
right,
can really manage. Otherwise, he'll be at the
right,
babysitter's, you know, from 5:30 in the morning
right.
till maybe
Right.
9:30 at
What good
night
is
after
that?
school, right?
Right.
And so
Right. And you can be
because
honest.
of
What's great is you can take a step back and just be honest with yourself about what you can honestly manage as a person, and not be afraid to say this is what I can offer, but if I do offer this, I'm committed to this and I will give this.
yeah, yeah, and so because of that, it left me so alone, purposeless. I didn't have any goals, aspirations. I had no motivation to do anything besides I would wake up, drag myself out of bed, go to work, come home, be depressed all fucking night. Think about, wow, this is my existence now. I get my son every other weekend. Like, you know what I mean? And the divorce was very, I guess, just to hit on, it was very, I can't think of the word right now, but it was very like easy. We came to the decision, another crazy story, within the span of 1 day together. And then the next day we addressed it and we're like, oh shit, I typed her a letter but didn't give it to her. She brought up the conversation. I went and printed the letter and gave it to her. I was like, okay, now the divorce revolves around our son. How do we not affect him? And so I had felt like I had this partner almost going into the divorce that was going to like tackle things and help and all this. And I was just left totally alone. You know, my parents didn't offer me a place to stay when I asked. No one checked on me. Um, I didn't ask for help from anyone. You know, just a real dark place where, like I said, it resulted in like, fuck, I don't want to be here. You know, I would rather die than do this. But I know the statistics and how that affects my son. And so I refuse to do so because his percentage goes up like 70 something percent, I believe it is, if your parent kills themselves.
When you have a
And
child, I wish I can't imagine. I've got my own story, but I got a vasectomy voluntarily at 34.
mhm,
So I took it off the table with my own stuff because I didn't think I'd be yeah, I got it my own stuff,
yeah,
but basically I took it off the table. So it's like very odd. And they're like, 34, you don't have any kids? I'm like, no. And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't expect to be a parent because I don't think I'd be a good one. I just
mm,
had this weird, it's not that I couldn't be or whatever, but like before I really tackle my own stuff, I had already made that decision in that way, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So
Oh, I understand. It resonates entirely. I never wanted to
but
be
I
married.
certainly advocate children. Like, I advocate family, and it's, like, the hardest
Mhm.
thing for me because I sound like a hypocrite. And it's like, when I did
Or
what I
you
did at the
learned.
time that I did it, for me, it was the right thing, you know? What's that? What'd
Mm.
you say?
I would say, or you learned, right?
Right, or you
You
learn,
come
right,
to an
and
understanding and awareness of it.
right. And that
Yeah.
was part of it too, because I look back at it, I'm not a resentful single or no kid person. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? How people are like, what about people without kids? How come we're not looked at? And it's like, no, community and family should be looked at first. If you're an outlier, that's your choice to be an outlier. Like I'm allowed to be my weirdo self because of the stability of what like 70 to 80% of the civilization does. So to normalize what I am is ridiculous. And that's what I see like when I see ideologies playing through is like they're normalizing what 1% of people do. And that's not stable. The stability really lies in the foundation of regardless if you want it yourself or not, but recognizing the value of the family in that way because it single-handedly provides purpose. You're living
It
for
does.
someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of the gift that I felt as well. And then I had to continuously sit every single day with the fact that I set this fucking schedule that putting me in my own grave, almost literally. Again, faced with the worst side of the mirror that I could think of.
And this is right. You've already now exposed yourself with ayahuasca and seen your darkness, right? So now you're like you picked at the scab
Everything.
and you are bleeding,
I have
right?
sat with I have sat with everything for so long on my own. That is why I've been able to heal it and navigate it because I know it so well. But yeah, I was on the healing journey during that point. So I'm also an advocate for plant medicine ceremonies, but I am a realist. They're not for everyone. And you have to expect or be okay with the unknown because a lot of people jump into these things because they hear all of the miraculous stories that happen. Because a lot of people that face the darkness afterwards aren't comfortable sharing it or exposing it because it's not the norm. The darkest place I've ever been came after my first ayahuasca ceremony. And I don't attest that to ayahuasca. That was me. Ayahuasca was able to give me the mirror to see what I had created.
It was a tool, right? It was a tool
Correct.
you used. Your openness to the experience, you asking the question is what led to the discovery. The ayahuasca was a tool you used to pry open that door or to unlock that key,
Absolutely.
whatever
Yep. And
that
I
is.
say ayahuasca is, it does a lot of things for many, many people and it acts differently on certain individuals and their mentalities, right? But I say primarily ayahuasca is a plant used for connectedness, understanding of energies and frequencies, because that kind of intertwines itself, and a tool of awareness more than anything. And that awareness can also be viewed as the mirror, right? Because everything is a direct reflection of yourself. And so
Yeah.
when you come to this high level of awareness, and then you're forced to sit in the shitty puddle that you made yourself for the last 28 years with no one in the world that seems like I wasn't giving myself up to anyone to like have these conversations. Nobody. right? And so you would sit and just mope every day of like, wow, I can't believe my mom hasn't asked how I'm doing, and it's been a year and a half. Wow, all this stuff, and it's like, you're by yourself, and that's okay. Learn from what's happening. If you're sad, learn why you're sad. If you're upset and angry, learn why you're upset and angry. All of these things are just emotions. And then we learn to I learn, sometimes it is taught and learned that way. But other times it's, in our interpretation of the projection of an emotion. And that's how we operate. That's when people say I'm passionate or I'm whatever. It's like, no, you're highly emotional right now, which means that you're not entirely connected to self. You're too
Mm.
invested in the
You're
emotion.
triggered, basically, is what it is.
Correct. And I'm not saying that I am not guilty of this, right? I am still addressing
Well,
my shit
that's the
just like
point.
everyone else, right?
Well, the reason you're sharing
We're
is
all
because
healing.
you resemble that remark. It's not like you're
Mhm.
devoid of it. You went through it. Like you're not sitting here as a preacher like Billy Graham from high atop telling you that God's going to absolve you of your sins and that you're evil while I'm, this perfect preacher.
Yeah,
Whatever.
yeah. I don't have a
You're saying
single bad
I've been in the
thought.
shit, man. I've been in the shit. So like the only reason I'm able to share it is because I can share it with you. We could probably share the experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, brother. That's what we do.
And it's funny, the analogy I use for that is like the ayahuasca thing for like anything, like cannabis, anything. Like you talk about the poker players, you only see those guys who win the World Series of Poker. You
Mhm.
don't ever see the kid who takes his college fund and blows it all chasing the poker dream because the percentage of winning that is such a you have to be such a high percentage, quality player or whatever, the best of
Mhm.
the best, to do that. It's not for everyone. You can't just sit up and go, I'm going to do this because like this is my thing. And that's
Mhm.
actually held me back. I've looked into ceremonies in Costa Rica, Rhythmia, and a couple other places. And
Yep.
I fear it because of what I've other experience that I've had that I hope, I'm sure we'll share at some other point. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't know. So mm, your darkness, the mirror in a general term, without obviously getting too specific, your first glimpse at yourself did you see more of the dimensional type stuff or the shapes, or did you get more of the voices and the people talking? Like how would you explain your
My
first
first
experience?
ayahuasca experience, you're saying?
Yeah, the one that
Yeah, yeah.
actually the one that really opened that for you.
Yeah, so I will say I'm not much of a visual individual. I don't It takes a good amount of medicine for me to actually get very good visuals, and when I mean very good, it's not like I just feel like I'm in like Avatar kind of, and I can
Right,
see some
totally, yeah,
energies, and
yeah.
sometimes my vision is broke over the couple of years, right, where I'll see like auric fields and energy blockages, things like that but it's not all the time. But for that first experience, oh man, let's see. I went in that, I already felt very alone. I was just in a marriage, right? And so I went there kind of in hopes to fix my relationship. And what happened was I figured out everything is connected and that there are special connections that you can make with other people. And it was an energy that I felt I had either already dismantled or could never recreate within the marriage. So that was a pretty quick realization. Some of the
So if I may,
Yeah.
you felt that your marriage relationship, that connection had severed and was irreparable. Is that what you're saying?
I would have given it effort, but the thought was,
Right.
I think I've already burned the bridge. And by
Right, that's what
me,
you're saying. You're
I
just saying
come
you're
to the
it's
realization of
just in a
me.
perspective. Right. And once again, that didn't mean you're gonna act on anything, but you basically saw that in this feeling, in this thing is you saw that connection to your wife irreparably severed from your perspective.
Correct. And I could feel it with somebody else in the space, another guy and another girl, where it was like, I love people so much. I love all of these people more than my own wife. So that's why I came back with that perspective of trying to build and reconnect that. But the thought had already happened of it's kind of separate already. Let's
Yeah,
be
ship sailed
realistic
kind of.
almost, you know? Yeah, like
Right.
you're looking at yourself in the mirror.
Right.
Would you stay with you? Like, fuck
Right.
no. Okay, well then you can't be upset about it, you know? Um, the experience overall for me was a very good. It was a hard mirror. I had seen a lot of the damage I've done. It opened up a lot of the bags that I had locked away and kept closed. It gave me a new level of awareness and understanding of what the fuck is happening out here, as opposed to going into that emotional place and just like literally asking, like, what the fuck just happened? After I would get so angry and burn every bridge I've ever created. And then I would settle and it's like, what just happened? Oh, you give all of your power away to that, to the anger and to the rage, because that's what you grew up with. So that's my, like, I guess, quote unquote specialty is anger and rage, because I
So
have
it just kind of stripped your ego away in a way to just say it's not about that. It's about solving the problem, not how you're reacting to the problem in a
not
weird
even
way.
solving the problem, because solving a problem has expectation and you shouldn't be putting expectations on things,
Got
right?
it.
Because then it creates this level of living in the future and the present, and you're pulled out of your present moment. So
Yeah.
any
So
time that
more
we are leaving,
realizing, yeah,
yeah.
like realizing then that you're in that emotional state, not in a logical reason state that can work that out.
Yep. And so it started to give me a perspective on all of these things at a very minute level, because it was so much to understand and take in. It was almost very overwhelming. And it also, yeah, it ultimately introduced me, like I had mentioned earlier, to that level of vulnerability I had never, ever seen in my life, never once. I just haven't ever seen it. And so I show up to this space where everyone can talk about anything and it's totally fine. And it's like, I'm the only one that's sitting here judging everyone. The emails that were happening before, people were signing them off. I'm starting to remember pieces, signing off like they, them, or and all that stuff. Where I was like, I don't want to fucking hang out with these people for a weekend. You know, I can't do that. And then,
That's a
uh,
really awesome point. That
do
specific
tons of
point
stuff.
makes total sense in today's like just world. My mom was driving through the neighborhood and she'd see like they're a little more conservative area, but it's like Trump, 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 Harris, Trump,
Mhm.
Trump, Harris, Trump, Harris, something like that. And she drives, she's like, I can't even be neighbors with someone who would have a, an X sign in front of their house. And you're like, and she caught that in her own head. It's like, that's where we're at nowadays. People used to break bread and have completely different ideologies, but it didn't matter. But they've made them important, even though they don't matter. They've made them important in some weird way. And they've used that and weaponized that against ourselves. And we're like, it's so weird that we see a they them and we're like instantly think, oh God, I gotta hang out with this person,
Yeah, I was super
and then you meet
judgmental.
them and yeah, I get it. So
Yeah,
you
very
that's what you kind of went
judgmental,
in
and
going, right? That's what you in seeing, kind of feeling
yeah,
that
so
way.
I went to a very small place, right? It's held ultimately at someone's house. It's a very beautiful house, but at someone's house. And it's this community I've never seen or even heard about. Like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I just know I've been called to do ayahuasca for about a year and a half. And now I just happen to be going through some shit that's making me kind of see it as an
Compelling you to go,
opening
yeah.
or a way. And um I had a relative go and sit at that place that had just recently returned and talked about it and then connected me where I was like, we're doing this, you know? But you show up there and no one greeted me at the door. No one was at the house. And I was just like, went in and sat down on a couch and pulled out my Sudoku book and just sat there by myself and like didn't want to go around the house. I didn't want to do anything. You know, I was very just like right into my own bubble. And eventually people start coming and going a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, how's it going? You know, like right back to my book. I don't even want to talk to anyone. I don't know what to talk to you guys about. That's how it felt. you wouldn't fucking understand anything I'm trying to go through or deal with, is what it continuously felt like. And then I remember this dude showed up or walked up to me, Steve, and he was like, "What's up, brother? How's it going?" I was like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" And he was like, he just stared at me for a minute and smiled. He's like, "You military?" It's like, "Yeah." He goes, "You think this is all hippy dippy bullshit?" I said, "Kinda." And then he just laughed and I was like, "Okay, we'll see." And then he sat with me and we just talked and connected and opened up. Come to find out, the, I guess, host of the space, the facilitator, the shaman, invited him to be a military brother next to me because I wasn't going to break otherwise. I wouldn't have put my guard down enough to open up to any of this because shields were fucking up. And then the
I can
big
totally see
realization,
that about you. And that's
yeah.
not a criticism. That's just an observation, man. It's not, you
Oh,
know,
just shut
I
off to
totally
the
get it.
world, man. I don't fucking care
Yeah.
about any of you. That's how I went into it. And then I left realizing that I just answer everything with anger and rage. So it opened the doorway to different means of communication, to put the sword away, right? It's okay to not have to cut everyone's head off because of my bullshit that I'm going through. And yeah, it, it was wild, man. Yeah. I remember sitting down
Yeah.
and again, this is where I was at going into it. I sat down next to a homosexual man, uh, pretty flamboyant, you know, and I fucking wasn't about that. I was like, of course they got me sitting next to this fucking guy, right? Like,
Yep. That was like,
who's
was that your
gonna
the first ceremony, the first one
first
of the
ceremony?
trip? Oh, jeez, I can't
Yeah,
even imagine. You are like this ball of rage already going in. You're just trying to get answers. You're like, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And then this
and
other guy who
bro,
just would
he's
derail you from this
six
goes and
inches
talks.
away from my yoga mat is where he is. And I remember he starts like
I
speaking
get it.
in tongues and shit. And I would just the whole time like get pulled out of ceremony and look over like this fucking asshole. Until eventually I went deep enough into the medicine to realize, oh fuck, he's going through a hard time and I can feel it. I can feel what he's working through right now. And it's the shit that I'm judging
Oh,
him for right now. It's the same thing.
oh.
And now I gotta sit with that, and I send him nothing but
What was
love
it?
and
What was it?
energy and
Attention?
healing.
What what would you say?
What do you mean?
Do you know what the feeling was? Do you know what the feeling was? And if you could describe it, you might not be able
The
to. So I was just
the
curious.
feeling is he's a homosexual man in 2022, not seen, understood. Everyone's judging him, including the guy that's 6 inches away from him. I want nothing to do with this guy going into ceremony until I can feel what's happening. When we finished ceremony, I gave him a hug. I told him I loved him. He was my brother to call at any time, and I will help you navigate whatever to the best of my ability. You know, and that was the most open I'd ever been with anyone in my whole life by such a magnitude I can't even barely describe. I can't really describe.
And I do know that ayahuasca is a tool. I get that.
Mhm.
But this is where I think you and I need to talk about because, like, we probably were lucky that we were able to do it and take a chance. Not everybody gets that, but like that you did it speaks to the strength of you. Like you sought the help. Like you had your bottom or whatever you deemed a moment that you felt I need this is my change moment or I'm done moment and you went all in with that. And there's a lot of bravery in that. And that is speaking to your bravery, but it also speaks to like you and I think we're pretty general average Joe people. It speaks that you can do it. That average general people can push themselves to things and to limits that they don't even know they are capable of.
Did you cut out there?
I think I lost you again.
Oh, there we go.
Right when I was talking good, man.
Right.
I'm hoping
That's
that
how
got
it
recorded.
goes.
Man,
I got
I might
chunks
have
of
to
it.
say that again, but
Yeah, yeah, go
but
ahead.
basically, it's like the strength and the bravery that it takes for someone to go through that, to stare themselves in the mirror in such a bad way. Once you see the negative in you, it is hard to already, because you already don't like yourself going in, because you're culturally kind of probably curated to not like yourself. Now you actually know why, you know what the problem is, and you still don't have a solution yet. You're just now exposed to it. So you're in this
Yeah.
really vulnerable position now where you have everything coming out. But you and I are average Joes. We still did it. And I always would encourage, if someone asks, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to talk to someone," I'm like, do it. Do it. Just that you're asking tells you that you're seeking, and you'll
Mhm.
find something because you're asking. You can't be forced to do it. You can't be forced. You have to willingly, and that's really a lot of this tour.
Yeah, yeah, that's the whole set and setting and being called, right? You're being called into the medicine
Yeah.
space, and
So
yeah,
that's the
so
question, the
sitting with
calling.
that.
Explain the calling. How did you got literally got a message to do this, or how did this calling happen?
I will say, when's the first time I heard about it? I think it was like a podcast, Rogan or something, one of those guys, right? A pretty mainstream one, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, again, it was kinda hippy dippy, like, bunch of pussies, kind of, right? And, that's not the case. And then after that, like, after I gave it a little bit of attention, it always came up. It would come up in random conversations. It would come up on, like, my Instagram and, like, different retreats and, like, Rhythmia and these different things, and then I would hear about stories of people that just went to go and do this that are, like, very distant, like, I don't even barely know them anymore, but I'm still hearing for whatever reason that they're doing this. Like, it's like, why the
Right.
fuck would I need to know that information? But it kept coming up until ultimately what you were talking about, right? Is I got to a point, I've been to this point many times, where I'd had enough. I'd have enough of my own bullshit. I'd had enough of life of why the fuck is everything seem like it's out to get me? Why am I so angry and aggressive? I can't figure this place out. I don't understand it. I don't even know what the fuck's happening. I need help. And that was the call. That was where I was like, okay. And then, like I said, I had a relative that came back from a retreat. And up until that retreat, they had been kind of secluded to the family. They were, everyone tried to help. You couldn't see that. Now you're just off by yourself. Well, it turns out that person disappeared to do ayahuasca and then resurfaced to the family with this whole different perspective and energy inside that was welcomed back in with love and all this stuff. And so got to see that in real time as well, while I can feel or see myself slowly diminishing continuously.
Declining.
Yep.
So you're
Until I
watching this
finally hit that
beautiful
point.
growth, this growth and blossoming of this new relationship with this relative, as yours is like withering and kind of falling off like off the stem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And come to find out, I mean, looking back at it, right, it was all because of me. It's the same cycle that I have continued to run up until very recently, which is things get too close, they get too hard and challenging, and Johnny needs to be alone and by himself. Like, that's not the truth, but you want to keep feeding the story. So that's what the story I was feeding at that time. And yeah.
It's a great that you've gotten to the realization. I mean, it's so challenging to find, you don't need to find an answer, let alone to ask the question to begin with. So
Yeah. And I guess to go off of what you were saying before about that is, right, you're utilizing these things as tools because they are. But sometimes the tool's going to give you a mirror or something that is so big and scary for you to see that you'll shut yourself off to it. Or, right, you do see it and then you get sent back home after retreat and you didn't do much healing, but you've seen a lot of shit. Now you are stuck in this space where you are aware of everything with no outlet, no answers, no teachers or guides to help you. That is why I am one of the biggest advocates about the integration process and how key and
right.
important that time is. Because my first integration, I went through a divorce the week after I got home and then went into the worst place I'd ever been. That's how I integrated. That's where I put myself. And then I
That
would
is
go to
not a good spot to
ceremony
be.
6 months after, 6 months after, 6 months after, and within that time being called to psilocybin and holding those spaces and ceremonies for myself and, lots and lots of journeys and work all over the place with all sorts of individuals to get to where I am at this point.
That is just an amazing story, journey, and everything. So, ayahuasca, psilocybin, cannabis, any other
Yeah,
psychedelics,
MDMA,
psychotropics, or
MDMA,
MDMA?
and LSD. I
Are there
Oh,
I have to ask this question
peyote
because I
and
don't know how to ask it.
hachuma.
So LSD, is there any of that in a pure 60s sense anymore? Because I heard that the original like formulation just was a pure thing, and it's
That I
kind of been
cannot confirm entirely. I was dating a girl at the time, and she had flown in and brought that with. I mean, we were told it was pure, right? Like you always are.
sure.
But it felt very clean. It was an incredible experience. Again, very eye-opening and awakening. But yeah, I guess ultimately, just to break it down a little, I've sat with ayahuasca maybe 10 times. Some of those being like 2 or 3 times in a retreat, which is 10 days long in Costa Rica.
Right,
I've
right. You
attended
do it like times over a 10-day, yeah,
Yep. So
period.
I've done 2 ceremonies in Costa Rica and 2 ceremonies here in the States. Um, I have sat with mushrooms, um, at a ceremonial only setting myself, holding space for only me, roughly 30 times over the course of these last few years. I've sat with MDMA, 4 times maybe, and I work with cannabis and grandfather tobacco daily. I've also worked with peyote and hachuma, the cactuses, and then other types of, like not such a sacred medicine that takes you so
Herbs,
far, right?
yeah.
Like working with,
Yeah, just certain herbs.
yeah, 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 absolutely.
Sure.
Hape,
That's
things like
amazing.
that, sananga,
Right.
those types of things.
So you integrate obviously the chemical side with the actual psychological side, if you will. It's because you realize it's not like just finding answers, but how to process solutions to those answers that you find in yourself.
Yeah, because a lot of the medicines that we're talking about, including psilocybin at like anything over, I would say like 2.5 to 3 grams, depending on who you are. Anything over like 1 cup of ayahuasca, sometimes over half a cup, you're going to start to go to places that are, like you said, you become aware of things, but you don't get answers there all the time. It takes a lot of attention and figuring out what the message was behind seeing a raven fly into the house and do a loop around us, land on the windowsill and fly out. Right? It's just a fucking bird. And it's like, no, 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 no. There's a message in there if you can find one. But the time that you have to spend doing that is all through the integration. And I find it
Did
to
you
be
have that?
very, what's that?
Did you have the Raven?
I did in my first sitting.
What is the Raven? Could you explain the Raven? And I'll have to explain it to you. Maybe I'd love to hear that.
So for me, it was, I haven't dug into this since almost. So let me
Cool.
sit with it for a moment here.
That's the beautiful. No, that's cool. That's the beauty of this.
Because it came right when I was getting frustrated at that guy, and it felt like it was a messenger that brought in my spirit almost. Like I had been reconnected to spirit through that. Like it was a delivery, and that it was a sign that there is more, you know what I mean? Like you're on the right path to these things. Continue to seek knowledge and wisdom. And these are your ravens. And they fly out and they circle you and they drop you with this message of, fuck, I can feel what this dude's going through next to me. I can feel everyone in this room. I can feel myself, more importantly. Right.
Yeah. Well, the reason I mentioned the Raven, um, I've done meditations and things. I've never done ayahuasca, MDMA, anything. Cannabis is very regular. I do not drink because drinking does bring out the darkest. I found drinking is the fucking demon. It's like you want to talk spirits, is reason it's called spirits. Those spirits are good or bad. There's like no in between. You either got happy people who drink or you got just absolute evil. And I am absolute evil
Mm-hmm.
when I go over a line. I see nothing but darkness.
I understand.
But anyways, but I'll share with you later, but I have visions.
Okay.
And during a meditation, a raven came to me, and I'll share it with you offline. So I was curious what you delved into, what the raven meant to you, because it sounds like it might be very simple, like as a messenger, because it sent me a freaking message, and I'm happy to share with you. Like I said, I don't
Yeah.
try to mention myself all the time because like it's this podcast. If I'm not going to be like, hey, I did this, because whoever listens to this anytime more than twice is going to hear the same stories, and it's like I'm not doing that. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. The Raven though, the Raven's a really interesting one.
So that's my interpretation, right? That's everyone's going to have
Yeah,
their own.
yeah,
There are like, if you were to look into that deeper, right? I got the message for that's what it was for me. So that's it, right? End of story. And so it is.
right.
But looking into that, right? The spiritual meaning behind a raven, what could happen when one is in your presence, if it was doing certain flight patterns, there are these different breakdowns of all of that. Um, there are people, one of my friends being kind of that individual that would be able to tell you more. So I could connect you with him if you wanted to
Oh,
really
I
dig
love
into
that.
the raven and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
like I said, I mean,
absolutely.
I'm very happy to share my stories. They are ridiculously crazy, and they're without chemical assistance. And yeah, I just like I said, because this is you're here, I don't want to bore everyone who's heard them before
Yeah,
on
yeah,
this show.
no, you're good.
If that
I
makes sense. It's
understand.
like I will say it. I listen to almost every single one of Rogan's, but sometimes those stories get just repetitive. And if you listen to
Okay.
two or three in a row, you're like, I heard that story, man. And even he apologizes for it, but what's he gonna do? He's connecting with the person he's talking to for the first time. It's really
Yeah.
hard for him to not be repetitive. So it's like something I'm just conscious of. So, but yeah, that's interesting, the Raven piece though, because I always saw it like as a wisdom piece, to your
Mhm.
point, the messenger, because it's got that smart, that there's like a hierarchy of flight. I think ravens are at one of the higher ends of the hierarchy on that
Yeah,
side.
they're like one of the top birds there is. Like they'll attack eagles and shit. I recently found that out. That's pretty wild.
Wow, it's crazy. I've seen something like crows and stuff where they use like Archimedes principle, and they put pebbles in water and puddles to like make it go higher so that they can drink from it. And you're just like,
Little
you figured
geniuses.
that shit out.
Yeah,
Like you figured
little
that shit out, because
geniuses.
that's not right. That ain't instinct. You know what I mean? Like you're churning that in your head somewhere. Like that, you work that out.
Yeah, that ain't in your
I don't It's
DNA, you
crazy.
know?
Yeah, once you do it, it gets in there, but it's like somewhere along the line that had to get churned. I mean,
Uh-huh.
imagine if they were still dinosaurs, man, we'd still be little muskrats. I
Oh,
don't think
yeah.
we'd be what
Fuck
we are
that.
if
Yeah,
that
alright.
asteroid didn't hit. So,
Oh, man.
all right, man. We're over an hour in. I love this story. Is there any a topic or anything you want to share with people, or any story you'd love to share with us about something specific? Before you came on, you might have made a list or anything, but
I didn't do anything, my friend. I try
yeah,
not to prepare too
perfect.
much because of that.
I don't either, because
Um,
I like getting it's this. It's kind of funny because we were talking about it. We've never met, but it's the
mm,
how you can only get one first conversation.
that's
So
right.
I always like the first conversation to be fresh, because it's like hit record and go, because you'll never know what, like I said, what comes out.
A
So
lot of good shit comes out in those conversations, right? Or pre-episode
yeah, for sure.
conversations, unfortunately.
They
Um,
do, and that's why you just have to hit record and just be done with it. You know what I mean? You never know if you can integrate those back in. So
yeah, absolutely. I guess I don't know. The only topic that I'm thinking about really is just awareness and I guess the strength or power of belief. And those are like two things that I've just been screaming through for the last couple of weeks while I've been navigating some pretty challenging things because you choose to believe what you choose to believe creates your reality. And I have consistently chosen like negative feedback loops over the past and stuff, and I feel them resurfacing. And so it's taking a lot of effort to have those books get pulled off the shelf, read, and then decide what are we really going to do with them right now? Because you're at a very, I guess, vulnerable point in my life where you can keep reading those same stories, or we can burn the fucking books and go into the unknown and we can write our own story. There's a lot of fear associated with that. Now, it's not something I can openly sit here and be like, I'm scared to fall in love. I'm scared to do this, right? None of that is truth. I've created the belief of fear around things that are inobtainable or unobtainable, quote unquote, in my life, which isn't the truth either. So I'm choosing to seek truth.
Because in this way, when you say that, if I may, I
Mhm.
would say psychologically you feel unworthy of those things, right? In some weird way in your head, somewhere
Either
you're
un
unworthy, therefore they're out of your reach in a almost realistic way, and then you make them out of reach.
Correct. It's not necessarily a feeling of unworthy. I feel very worthy of them. But what happens is when it actually starts to happen, right? You start to be vulnerable with the person that you love, or opening in your relationships or your families, or you have a child and it introduces this new level of mirror, kind of. You're faced with the stories or the truth. And we oftentimes take the stories because that's comfortable and we may not even know what the truth is. And that's where the awareness comes in. That's where I like to work with people, is building the awareness, because without the awareness, you cannot address anything. You don't even know there's an issue. But once you build the awareness, then it's all about belief. But it's believing in the truth. And the truth is not always the best thing for you to see. It fucking hurts like hell a lot of times. So,
Right.
for
Yeah, I always
instance,
look at it like a
I,
piece of clay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
yep. I was just going to say, I guess, to what I tend to have done in the past, and I'm very aware of now, is what many people do, and it is creating your own reality. I don't think I'm this good. I don't think these things. I have issues with self worth and this and that. And then we feed into them. And then by feeding into those, it creates the same loop. Then we find ourselves, why do I keep dating these piece of shit guys that treat me bad? Change the energy that you are putting yourself into, change the energy that you are seeking, change something. You're aware, but your awareness is getting you to a level that you choose to not believe. What you're doing is believing in the fear
Can I piggyback on that?
more than the truth.
Can I piggyback on that real quick? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may piggyback on that, it's like this. A baseball player doesn't go up to the plate and say, "Don't strike out." They say hit. They say hit. Like when I think we look at relationships as things we're trying to avoid getting into. So a lot of times it's like, I don't want a short person. I don't want a mean person. So they start saying the things they don't want versus actually seeking what they want. And when they focus on whether it's a no in front of it, they focus on whatever they wrote down. So even if they say, I don't want X, Y, and Z, they focus on those things. It's like people who go on diets who gain weight. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because
Yeah. I mean,
they're
some level of it.
focusing in the wrong way. They just have to shift the way they're looking toward the positive things they see.
Correct. Putting emphasis and an explanation at the end of the what we are desiring and trying to therefore manifest and create. But I will say, I am an advocate of writing things that you don't want, but not to hyper focus on them. It's a level of
Right.
awareness. You
Right.
are
Well, you
seeing
set
it's
limits,
out now,
right?
right? Yeah. So you have
Right.
these parameters. Now, I am not an advocate of fucking they must be between 5'1" and 5'2.5" and 103 pounds. It's like, no, no, no. What are you looking at emotionally,
Right.
spiritually? What are you looking at? Of course, you want a dime piece. Everyone does. Okay, well, be realistic. Okay, it's okay to shoot for the stars and have high aspirations, but don't treat everyone else like an asshole then. There's all these little things, but ultimately it comes down to building awareness and then choosing to believe in what you want to create as opposed to the belief and the fear that we like to operate out of so often.
Yeah. Two things about that. So
Mhm.
the awareness part, uh, I always use it like a piece of clay. Like the clay is their subconscious. The awareness is taking whatever the shape it currently is and pulling it out and then looking at it and going, is that shape fitting my life? It clearly isn't shaped right. Then you have to be aware to be able to then believe you can mold that into the right shape and then get it back in there so that you can now because until you do bring it to your consciousness, and that's your awareness that you're talking about, that subconscious will rule you. It will make you do bad things to stay in control. It doesn't understand good and bad to you. It just understands keeping you alive even at the base level. That's that base survival level, and that's the misery that I think you and I probably have experienced in our lives at some point, that we felt the need to get better or to improve from that.
Yeah, it's very
And then
attached to the root
oh,
chakra.
yeah. Yeah. And then the
Sorry,
second
go
thing
ahead.
about belief, the Henry Ford thing was always like, whether you believe you can or can't, you're right. And that's exactly
Yeah,
what you're saying is you put the belief in whatever the energy is that you will succeed or not. And we self-sabotage all the time.
yeah,
Why we do it's
absolutely.
different, but we do it all the time. And then some people don't. It's just simple as that.
Yeah. One thing let's see where we go with this one. One thing we'll shake things up a little bit here. One
Oh
thing
yeah,
that I like
please
to
do.
talk about with individuals, it's more of a private conversation oftentimes. It happens on the podcast occasionally as well, though, is um the perspective on like religious belief versus this belief and what is all of this. And what I mean by that is I am a massive advocate. I just label it as spirituality, but I couldn't tell you a definition of what spirituality is. But I believe we all fucking feel the same way about everything. Your God could be Allah or Buddha or Shiva or whoever, but it's all energy. And when you can view the world from energy, it becomes very simple. Well, very complex, but also very simple. We like to overcomplicate things. And so what I have been recently challenging some of my friends that are, very religious to some aspect or very like deep within belief, but it's always giving to somebody of higher power. So what I ask them to do is for just one time, one prayer that they do is to put the belief back into themselves. And that is not to discredit anyone or not give power to Allah or Buddha or whoever. But isn't the essence and the goal, isn't the belief, and I am not very dialed into all of this, but that we are all pieces of God, right? Like we are all God. And
Yeah.
so if
We're in the
that's the
vision of
case,
God, or we're made in the shape of God or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, in the
absolutely.
vision
Yeah.
of God,
And
and because that is through
and
the
empowering
masses,
yourself and bettering yourself is what good is. Where do you think God comes from? God is the act of good in each situation. That is truly what God is. And it's such a nuanced thing that you come across that makes it, when you start personifying it and making it a being and all that, it muddies all the water. It's such a
it doesn't
concept,
give
not a
enough
thing.
credit. It doesn't give
Right.
enough credit. It gives it
Right.
to one being, to one thing,
Right.
but if we as the masses create what that is, then putting
Right.
energy back into self creates a level of self-worth that you wouldn't attain otherwise. Now, I
Right.
believe that
Absolutely.
belief and the power of belief, like we can still both go get touchdowns, but doing it through yourself is going to feel a lot better throughout the process because you will learn to be grateful and give love to all things, as opposed to you play a mild level of victimhood until eventually you have such a belief in something else that it has saved you. Think about saving yourself. Imagine the power in that. Think of the work that
Yeah.
you're doing. People aren't giving this to you. Nothing, no one's coming down to help you besides yourself. You're reconnecting to self, right?
There's a reason we got connected, man, for real. Just some of the words resonate very strongly. Because I am not atheist, but I am anti-theist. And what I mean by that is like the human. I don't know what it is with what I've experienced. Like I said, we'll talk sometime about what I've experienced, but I don't know what it is. But what I do know is that we don't have it right. And to have a middle person and some kind of like handing out of religion of some sort just seems such a dirty way to do it. It has to be direct in some whatever way that is. And whatever that, and I'm not even talking about a higher power. I'm just talking about however you feel. that belief has to be direct. And that has to go through you in some way more than anyone else. You're the antenna. You're your own conduit. Like you can't hold on to someone else and get somewhere. You know what I mean? Like it is through you
Yeah.
ultimately, right? Like in that way. And that is not to disparage faith, not to disparage belief or any of that stuff. All of those
Nope.
things have value in their own ways, but to look at it in that kind of smaller way, which unfortunately humans, many don't have that capacity to understand the nuance of God in the way it's kind of designed, I think. You know, they think it's like, and on top of that, to your point, we're all connected to make it. I don't know if you've ever spoken with Bobby Azarian, but I had like a 2-hour podcast with him and he's brilliant. He wrote a book, Romance of Reality, and he did a couple hours with Rogan too.
Okay.
And he speaks of consciousness being actually an emergent property. He and
Mhm.
I are of this kind of, I don't want to say beliefs, but it's like ideas. Cause like to me, belief to you is where the concrete happens. Like I've always said beliefs are dangerous outside of yourself because like you start believing in something. And if someone attacks that thing, you feel like it's an attack on you. So you take it personally. So I like to say I have ideas and thoughts, but I understand what you mean by belief. You mean it in a like in a power, an empowerment kind of way. But
Correct.
listening to
It's giving
Bobby
it
talk,
back to
yeah,
self.
right, absolutely. And listening to Bobby talk is like you and I is that if we are the creators of this, then God, that top piece is actually at some point the universal consciousness that we ultimately create as we became conscious and then
Mhm.
evolved. And then so it I don't see it top down. I actually do see it similar to the way you're describing, like bottom up. Now, I don't know if that's how you believe it or any see it, but that's how I kind of felt you describe it. So it's kind of interesting that you said it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is everything is connected, and through the connection of everything creates what we interpret as this one pinnacle of something. When we are
Yeah.
that's not that's just not the truth. I've seen way too much shit to realize that ain't the truth. That's not how
Right,
this place
exactly, right?
works.
There's some kind of weird interpretation that we got going on here that's not right,
Yeah,
right?
that's just
So,
not how this place is working actually.
yeah. I definitely do need to talk with you offline about all that stuff just because I've had that other stuff, but,
Mhm.
so this has been so enlightening, man. So how do you get, if I may, how do you get your guests? Or how do you come across them? Or how do you find the people who are willing to share that stuff? Do they contact you or?
I'm trying to think. I have had almost nobody contact me to come on. I have either reached out randomly by seeing people's posts or something on Instagram or connecting at, a health and wellness fairs or something like that where I'm just out and about, or I meet some beekeeper that's like just knows his shit. And it's like, come talk to me about that stuff, like give me your business
That
card. It's
sounds
stuff like
interesting.
that. It's like I just want to know whatever I find interesting is who I can have on. But the goal, right, is if I can keep it as oriented towards healing modalities and what can be offered. And then with that, the journeys and experiences of individuals. And so that's the other piece is people that I just find very interesting, or I can feel that energetic connection where either I know you've been through some shit or you know something. Whatever that is, I would love to hear how you got to that point because I'm curious to know what it is, how you got there. And then maybe other people are going to learn as well. You can learn anything from anyone if you choose to hear it in that spotlight, right? So bringing these people on to come and talk about, like most of the guests I'm just going on a tangent. Most of the people I talk
Oh,
to or
oh,
reach out
I'm
to are
listening, man,
like,
please.
I have nothing to say. I'm just a normal dude until you sit down on the podcast and you share something that you thought you were going to die with and never share to even your like spouse or anything. Everyone has an entertaining story. Give yourself some credit. This place is
Yeah.
fun. It's cool. It's exciting. It should be this realm. We should be enjoying this. But you can't enjoy it if we want to keep feeling like we are all individuals on our own fucking path, disconnected from one another. Therefore, we have to battle. I don't care to battle anyone over anything. I'll talk to you about whatever you want. Maybe you'll change my opinions, but that's for me to decide. It's, I don't,
Right.
we like, again, we overcomplicate so much. And I don't know. Ultimately, I get my
Do
guests by
no,
reaching out to people.
there it is.
Yeah.
So do you find a lot of people receptive to it? I mean, how many people would you how many podcasts would you say you've had maybe?
I've done whatever 75 or 76 of them. I did take a
Wow.
one
Okay.
one yeah, I did take 1 month off just a couple months ago because I was coming to some pretty heavy realizations in myself that one of the promises that I tried to make right away, or that I did make, is I will not do the podcast or any of this stuff if my cup is not full. Because if my cup is
Yes.
not full, then you don't get the genuine Johnny. And if you don't get the genuine side of me, I can't pull the genuine side out of you. It's not a fair energy exchange. And so I took 1
Saw
month
that
off for
podcast with
that.
that gentleman that you declined a couple times, the gentleman that you did podcast with. You
Yep.
mentioned that on his.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
We had
and he
rescheduled a
and
handful.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Things were
totally
getting
get it, and I
challenging,
was
man.
shocked when you booked so quickly. I was like, because I remember hearing that stuff about being ready or whatever, and then you just jump right on. So I was like, wow, this timing must have just happened, you know? Of course,
Yeah, man.
kismet,
And
synchronicity,
because
all that.
yeah. And like I said, because I'm vulnerable, and I said I wouldn't really talk about too much of this, so I'll leave it very generic, but I'll be totally honest. I'm going through some of the hardest shit I've ever navigated right now. Um, sitting with self a lot again in this house by myself. And like I said, creating boundaries and families and relationships and all of these different means that it's it's tricky to navigate, but it doesn't mean that I can't maintain a full cup. I'm aware of all of it. It's all my own shit. That means I can work on it. It's exciting. I don't have to let it fucking ruin my days or go to work angry and bitter and irritated over, the fact that I don't feel seen because whatever, right? We create all these wild things that are so minute oftentimes that dictate how we control our lives. But I'm in control of my life. And so I'm going to try and do my best with that.
I like that. Well, I think we should leave on that, and I'll hit stop recording here. But if you do want to share offline, whatever you're going through, so you don't have to share. I'm happy to be a sounding board, and trust me, you'll understand after we talk offline.
Yeah, I
But
appreciate that, brother.
would you like to share any final thoughts, any words, anything with your socials, any of your information? Please share. Let us know how we can get in touch with you, and maybe someone listens to this and wants to share their story with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I will say thank you again for having me on. I appreciate it. For everyone, if you don't like the tangents, apologies, but that's where the work is done sometimes, right? Enjoy it while you got it. And so, yes, the platform is Warrior Healer Podcast. That is on all of the streaming networks besides YouTube. I don't do all video right now. And so the audio only options are all there, though, and Spotify, podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all of that. You can also follow along on Instagram. That is Warrior Healer Podcast, or my personal one is Johnny Jiu Jitsu. And then when will this one be coming out for you?
I'm gonna cut it and try to get it up tonight or some kind of at least have it uploaded somehow as soon as I can. I literally cut it. It's gonna have all the fumbles and foils in it because you know what? That's kind of part of the conversation. So
It's all real life, brother. And that's how we do things. Well, in that case, then I had talked about it previously, but November 10th at the Memorial Hall at War Memorial Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's going to be a free veteran sound bath. That will be running from 4:30 to 5:30. Doors will be open from 4 till 6. Anyone that is not military or veteran or any of that, you are a civilian, you are still welcome to come. There will be in-person donations that we ask, if you can donate, to please do, so that we can continue trying to put on these events for veterans and different individuals we feel like may benefit from these healing modalities, right? These things that maybe they have no fucking clue what a sound bath is. Well, come and check it out. It's
mhm.
really, really beautiful and great. So
It
yeah, that's
is.
an open
Yeah,
invitation for everyone. And
beautiful. I'll have it up
yeah, I
before
think
that.
that
So
wraps it
please
up.
email me that link and all that for that for sure.
Absolutely, will do, brother. Yeah, I think that's it. You guys can check me out, Warrior
Cool,
Healer
man.
Podcast. I appreciate you. Oh, and the last thing I will say is, of course, I was going to forget this piece, right? Giving myself credit. I do work with individuals, as I mentioned, as a spiritual advisor. So if that at all interests you, or you are just curious to know more about how I operate or if it's a good fit for you, you can email warriorhealerpodcast@gmail.com. And then from there, we can set up a free 20-minute phone consultation, a discovery call, and talk about what that looks like. And if it's a good fit, we can go from there.
That is beautiful, man. Well, Johnny, it's very nice to meet you. Like I said, I'm going to hit end recording here, but please stay on so we can share what's going on.
Yeah.
Everyone, Johnny Martinez, Warrior Healer Podcast. Check it out. You'll check it out. We'll get links up there. I'll have it up in a couple days. Johnny, thank you again so much for sharing your time with me.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Have a great night, man. Take care.
You too, brother.
1, 2, 3, 4. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must say, good night, sweetheart. Good